My 30M family pushed my anxious 25F wife to her breaking point, insisting she change to fit their mold. After a painful confrontation, mom called her a narcissist and started yelling. Now my wife wants no contact and I'm torn between loyalty and love. What do I do? So to provide some context, my wife and I have recently gotten married. We were not particularly interested in having a grand wedding, and we postponed our marriage for quite some time. Therefore, we recently decided to sign the paperwork and plan to have a vow exchange later this year with family, followed by a nice dinner. We have been together for just over 3 years and were engaged for half of that time before tying the knot. Early in our relationship, my then-girlfriend realized that the frequency with which my family wanted to engage in activities was not to her liking, as she is not very social, and social gatherings tend to cause her stress. She greatly prefers staying at home with our cats, only occasionally going out, and typically likes to have several weeks of downtime before participating in any activities. She has a diagnosed anxiety disorder and has experienced religious trauma, which contributes to her feelings when family events arise. Additionally, we are not religious, whereas my family is, and at some point during our relationship, I had to come out to my parents as an atheist, a difficult admission for me that I had been apprehensive about for a long time. Our values and political beliefs also differ significantly, but I had maintained a don't talk, don't tell approach with my family. My family has always been very close-knit, but I had naturally distanced myself over the years, even before meeting my now wife, due to life experiences that opened my eyes to various truths, going through college and of course my deconversion. There was a sense that it was safer to avoid discussing certain topics than to engage in lengthy debates defending beliefs they disagreed with, and I often feared hurting my mother's feelings, a tendency that runs in my family. I would still visit for holidays, birthdays, and other gatherings, but I definitely preferred staying at home, which was about an hour and a half away, and enjoying my time alone or with friends. The first significant conflict between my family and my girlfriend occurred when my sister got engaged to someone she should not have and moved quite far away to have the wedding. Thankfully, she is no longer with that person and is in a much better place now. At the time, she texted me to share wedding details and asked if my girlfriend would like to be a bridesmaid, which she declined due to her anxiety about being in front of a crowd but appreciated the offer. However, my sister's next text asked whether I wanted my girlfriend included in the wedding photos. I interpreted this as questioning whether I was serious about our relationship. My girlfriend felt uncomfortable because the question implied that we might break up, making it unwise to include her in long-term photographs. This misunderstanding led to a significant conflict where my sister became upset after realizing how my girlfriend felt. Ultimately, it resulted in my mother calling us, upset and somewhat yelling about how our actions were hurting my sister. The situation only resolved when I managed to get everyone to discuss their feelings and intentions. I had to call my sister and mother separately to discuss matters for hours. My girlfriend ultimately apologized for misinterpreting the situation and how everything transpired. My mom and sister conveyed nice sentiments, assuring us not to worry, but they never apologized for their overreactions, even though peace was eventually restored. From that point onward, my girlfriend initially tried her best to stick to the strategy of just showing up and avoiding topics to maintain peace and avoid conflict. However, over time, the constant mention of God began to irritate her, and there were instances when my wife would contribute her thoughts based on her experiences, only to have them debated or dismissed. For instance, her thesis demonstrated how redlining caused severe disparities in neighborhood conditions in the city we live in, which arose when my father questioned why certain areas transitioned from nice to dilapidated. He dismissed her academic work, which hurt her feelings and made her feel that her contributions were being undermined. A couple of politically related topics briefly surfaced, with hints of differing views expressed, yet no substantial debate ensued. During this period, my girlfriend even accompanied me to church with my family a couple of times, but neither visit went well. Honestly, I had not realized how strange church would feel after my deconversion, nor had I recognized the problematic elements I formerly overlooked. Thus, attending church with my family was soon off the table, even though we still were not fully explaining our reasons to them. She began experiencing anxiety whenever family dinners, birthdays, or holidays were approaching, so we decided she should skip some events and let them know she was not up to attending. Additionally, she developed a severe bacterial infection during this time, making her too ill to participate in some gatherings. Even after recovering, she attended a dinner when she really should not have, as we were unaware of her stomach infection then. She also attempted to establish a relationship with my mother by texting and updating her about our lives. However, I believe that our earlier interactions and her reluctance to attend every family gathering led my family to believe she disliked them more and vice versa. They consistently assured her that she was welcome and made efforts to include her, but given that my girlfriend was still trying to avoid causing problems, she felt unable to voice her discomfort and had to endure situations that became increasingly hard for her to manage. I regret that she maintained this approach for my sake, as I believe she would have addressed her feelings sooner, though I wonder whether it would have led to a different outcome. This situation brought about the next confrontation between her and my mother. My mother expressed her desire to eventually go on a mission trip to Egypt. My wife mentioned that she thought it would be exciting to visit, but felt she could never go due to the treatment of women there and the numerous vaccines she would need, stating it was a lot to consider, but that my mother should embark on the trip if she felt safe doing so. In response, my mom remarked that she might also reconsider going if that were the case, as she no longer trusts vaccines. This comment surprised me since my father has always worked in the medical field and I studied science in college. My wife replied, "Well, they are safe, so there is nothing to worry about, but you should always consult a doctor," and she provided some sources as well. What followed was a back-and-forth exchange, where one of the claims insinuated a connection between vaccines and autism, prompting my wife to feel the need to refute this assertion until it escalated into an outright argument. My mother expressed her belief that my wife did not respect her life experience, citing anecdotal instances about something her school psychologist friend had encountered at a conference, further adding to her doubts about the vaccine-autism link. This conversation occurred late, and we ended up going to bed, but we awoke to a text from my mother sent at 3 a.m. in a new group chat addressing how disrespected she felt and various other random religious comments and claims. I later engaged in a lengthy dialogue with my mother about the whole situation, which culminated in me coming out to her as an atheist and sharing numerous reputable sources supporting vaccines as legitimate science. Ultimately, I realized we needed to sit down and have an open and honest conversation, as my family was unaware of my wife's religious trauma and the issues that they had unintentionally caused her discomfort. We scheduled a meeting at a neutral location, a coffee shop, although I do regret this choice since it was busier than I had anticipated and it was not the ideal setting. Unfortunately, the conversation did not go well. Initially, my family seemed apprehensive about our chosen location, which, while somewhat justified, was meant to ensure that if the discussion turned sour, we could avoid an explosive argument in our home and potentially ask my parents to leave. The conversation began on a somewhat positive note, and it seemed that we would be heard about my wife's feelings and our differences, and that we would all agree to avoid certain sensitive topics to prevent arguments. Unfortunately, when religion came up, my wife mentioned that things said in their church had disconcerted her specifically, remarks suggesting that it is not optimal for women to work, bolstered by clips from Modern Family targeting the presumed ineffectiveness of a gay couple compared to a traditional straight family. To my shock, my parents agreed with this perspective. While that was predictable, my wife aimed to convey her background, indicating that she had been subjected to more extreme churches and that this kind of rhetoric had soured her feelings toward churchgoers. She expressed a preference for not knowing their beliefs to enable us all to navigate family interactions smoothly. During this conversation, my wife also came out to my parents as bisexual, and at this point she was in tears while my parents continued to interject with questions such as, "So you just want us to change what we believe?" Or, "Well, we love people regardless of whether we agree with them." Or what became my mother's favorite retort, "It's best not to impose those burdens you have on others," referring to her traumas. While my wife tried to respond amidst the flood of questions and her own sobs, my father's gaze directed at me conveyed, "This is ridiculous. Why did you have us come here for this?" And he scoffed slightly as if the situation was absurd. At this point, my then-fiancé had enough and got up to leave. I did not follow her immediately, which I now deeply regret as I was simply stunned and overwhelmed. My family continued to address me, claiming that it seemed like she was attempting to prevent me from forming a family. By the way, we do not want children, so this is another matter my parents are not thrilled about, but I believe they were primarily referring to my immediate family. I attempted to listen and articulate my thoughts, albeit in a fragmented and disorganized manner since I was still trying to process what had transpired. My fiancé had left, and I had not spoken to her enough to understand what had triggered her departure. After some time, I managed to persuade my family to vacate the premises, expressing my love for them before heading out to find my fiancé. She explained what happened and why she felt compelled to leave. I understood her position, yet I was still reeling from the entire situation. I have come to recognize that during confrontations with my family, I often struggled to articulate my thoughts clearly. I held expectations that my parents would be more open-minded and accepting toward the woman I chose to bring into my life, as I had not faced such situations previously. In stressful confrontations, I tend to freeze up and become uncertain about how to respond or act. This is something I am working on. There were some text exchanges, including one from my father where he somewhat apologized. He used the word sorry, but also included a statement expressing confusion about why I would bring someone around who sees so many faults in them. Thus, it has been challenging for me to acknowledge his apology fully. To be honest, even today, our relationship hasn't truly improved. We've merely been around each other while pretending that everything is fine. My mother was more adept at expressing remorse and extending hope for reconciliation. Although tensions persisted for a while, fortunately, things gradually lightened and improved. As Christmas approached, my wife obviously did not want to join my family, which meant I would have to go alone while she stayed home. It quickly became apparent that this arrangement did not sit well with me and was unfair to her. I realized I needed to convince my mother to truly grasp our perspectives and to recognize how my father had handled the situation poorly, at least enough to make my wife feel comfortable attending. After a 2-hour discussion, we reached an understanding. My mother extended a proper apology to my fiancé and expressed a desire to keep communication open for better mutual understanding, providing some hope for resolution. Christmas went smoothly, and our lives returned to a state of normalcy. In the time since then, we got married, and my parents did not offer congratulations, which felt odd. However, I attributed their lack of acknowledgement to the fact that they would likely do so during our vow exchange later this year with both families present. By the way, neither of our families participated in our marriage. We merely signed some paperwork. Her grandfather acted as the notary out of convenience, though he is a great guy. At one point, we had considered planning a wedding, but we both realized that neither of us felt particularly excited about the concept and that my only motivation stemmed from fulfilling my family's expectations. In an effort to stay true to what we truly desired, we decided to handle things on our own. That was until last weekend. My wife received an invitation to my cousin's baby shower. She felt obligated to attend since it was a cousin with whom I used to be close, and her mother specifically reached out to invite her. We understood it would be a challenging environment for her with 6 aunts and many cousins present, but she chose to give it a shot. We established a plan for her to leave if she became overwhelmed, which my family supported, understanding her needs. Leading up to the event, my wife felt stressed, so we made sure she had an exit strategy in place should she require one. Apparently, my mother also arranged an axe-throwing session for the males in the family, meaning I would not be able to stay with my wife, which I regret, but she assured me she would be fine and would notify me if she felt overwhelmed and needed to leave. Eventually, I began receiving texts from her indicating that she was not enjoying the gathering. She shared that my aunts were loud, making it difficult for her to hear, and that their behavior was too intense for her liking. Additionally, she discovered that one of my aunt's husbands was unwell and hiding out in another room, a fact my wife would have appreciated knowing, given her susceptibility to illness and our friend's ongoing battle with cancer. My family merely informed her it was just a cold, and that it was no big deal since he worked in a hospital, which did little to ease her anxiety. As the gathering progressed, she sensed that she was becoming overwhelmed and was on the brink of a panic attack. She made an effort to collect herself enough to thank my cousin for the invitation and extend her congratulations before leaving. Shortly after, she called me, trying to calm down and asking where I was so she could come to pick me up. I informed my father and brother, who were about to get food, and they exited while I waited. Afterward, we headed back to my family's house where I could say goodbye before we left. They inquired, "Did she tell Mom?" To which I replied that I did not think so since we had not heard from her. My sister's boyfriend bade me farewell with a hug. I called my mother to inform her that we were departing and briefly explained what had occurred. She simply said, "Okay, I understand, I love you." Later, my brother texted my wife to check on her, although he does not believe my aunt's behavior is healthy. During our exit, my wife found their discussions, particularly about circumcision and the challenges of raising daughters, disconcerting, especially with all of their daughters present. My mother, however, did not reach out to my wife afterward. Once we returned home and my wife calmed down, she decided to contact my mother to explain why she left the gathering. She felt it would have made her feel cared for if my mom had checked in on her at any point or had asked her sisters to tone down the volume. My wife was beginning to realize that larger family gatherings might not be suitable for her and wanted to convey this to my mother. She intended to skip the major family Thanksgiving gathering, clarifying that it was not because of any actions from my immediate family, but simply because she knew it was not her environment. Additionally, she wanted to offer the suggestion of coming over the next day for a smaller Thanksgiving celebration with just my immediate family, which I would likely have attended as well. Unfortunately, this conversation did not go well either. The aim of this discussion was simply to update my mother and express feelings that my wife perceived as a lack of care from her. We wanted to continue the open dialogue they had previously established about sharing discomforts. However, my mother interrupted my wife shortly into her explanation, emphasizing the closeness she shares with her sisters and how their dynamic allows for friendly teasing. While this may be true, my wife should still have the right to dislike that kind of environment. My mother continued to assert that they should not have to change their behavior for my wife and suggested that requesting quieter behavior would be excessive and rude. She commented that my wife was focused on her cousin and trying to monopolize the situation, accusing her of wanting to make everything about herself. My mother stated that my wife lacked the life experience to comprehend these dynamics, suggesting she should not take offense and demand too much from others. At this point, my wife began to tremble, handing me the phone as I attempted to express my feelings to my mother. Once again, my mother interrupted me, causing my wife to lose her composure and yell at the phone I was holding. Let us talk, son of a bitch, let him talk." She was both crying and hyperventilating. At this moment, I regretted not being more assertive on my wife's behalf. While I did not actively defend her, I motioned for her to calm down and attempted to re-enter the conversation. Unfortunately, my mother continued her barrage of accusations, claiming my wife wanted to tear the family apart, censor them, and labeling her as a narcissist before our call ended. In the days following, I engaged in discussions about how my brother believed I should not have allowed my wife to speak to my mother as she did, whereas my father reached out, expressing a desire to talk, but also understanding if I needed space. I have come to realize that we often approach these conversations with a general, fair objective, yet certain aspects of what we say become misinterpreted and exaggerated before we can fully articulate our points. As a result, the discussion devolves into confusion, making it challenging to track everything that needs to be addressed while we are portrayed as villains. I now suspect my parents have harbored negative feelings towards my wife longer than they initially acknowledged, likely due to her political leanings and their perception of her corrupting me. This is particularly absurd, considering I developed my beliefs before meeting her. We simply align on many matters and complement each other in that regard. My wife feels that it is hurtful I do not stand up for her more during these moments, but she understands that I am working to improve my confrontational skills. I have often felt apprehensive about confrontation, especially concerning my family. As I mentioned earlier, we have always tried to avoid hurting my mother's feelings, as she can be somewhat temperamental, although I have not lived with them in nearly 12 years, so I cannot say how things have changed since then. I believe the best course of action moving forward is to allow my wife to avoid contact with my parents unless she chooses otherwise, which is her current desire. I cannot and will not force her to do anything she does not want to do. I will likely continue to attend family gatherings excluding Christmas, as I refuse to leave my wife alone during that time, which will lead to an interesting discussion, but aside from that, our lives will mostly remain separate. I do not believe my family can accommodate my wife's presence, and I no longer perceive any fondness they might have for her. I can only imagine they would not mind if we were to divorce, but I am resolute in not doing so, even though that question did arise, breaking my heart when I heard her express fear of such an outcome. Her sentiment is that she hates feeling as if she must yell to be heard, but she believes that standing up for how she feels is necessary. She worries that my decision to divorce her might stem from a desire to appease my family, find someone they approve of, and alleviate my stress, which again breaks my heart. I have assured her that none of that is true. Even if we were to separate, there is no guarantee that my life would be less stressful, just that she would not be a part of it, which is not something I desire. I told my father that I would speak with him eventually, but I am not yet ready. I am exhausted from these types of interactions and witnessing my wife feel undervalued or neglected compared to how my other family members are treated. Do you believe I am justified in my feelings? Am I overlooking something about my wife, or is my family correct in saying that she demands too much and is too critical of others, thereby causing unnecessary problems? Please let me know if you have any questions for clarification, and I will do my best to answer. Thank you. Story 2. My ex reached out 3 years later, yet I'm not desperate. We're just friends, she insists, but why does she keep asking for my help? After countless ups and downs, am I just a safety net? Could we have a fresh start, or is she just seeking validation? Before I explain everything, I hope you can understand my perspective and get into my mindset. I am also seeking advice, or if anyone could read what is happening and provide some insights into their observations. For the most part, I can view the situation objectively now, setting emotions aside, but I would appreciate any other input and advice on how to move forward. Context: meeting for our first date. Back in early 2020, just before quarantine began, I was a sophomore in high school. I met a girl who would eventually change my life. I was 16 male and she was 15 female at the time. We were in the same grade because I had been held back. I first direct messaged her on Instagram in late December and met up with her for the first time on New Year's Eve. She showed interest in me from the beginning, and I was her first kiss that night. She was the most innocent girl, and I was surprised to discover she had never kissed anyone before. Objectively reflecting on it now, I think she craved attention and was also a very dedicated Christian, yet still wanted a boyfriend or someone to connect with. Over the next 2 months, we went on dates, and I played the role of a high-value guy who also had the ability to attract other girls. I would leave her messages on read all day because I was at sports practice. Eventually, she asked me when I was going to officially ask her out because I had gotten into her head. At this stage, I was somewhat playing games, which made her become attached and desire to lock me down. So I asked her out in February 2020 and we began dating. Quarantine days and the relationship dynamic. Once COVID-19 went into full effect, I ended up seeing her every single day. I loved being with her and she was deeply in love with me, yet I let her do all the chasing. I would be with her 7 days a week and never went a day without talking to her. However, she would primarily be the one to request hangouts, and I would simply show up as myself. She frequently posted about me and gave me wonderful, meaningful gifts throughout our relationship, such as a scrapbook of all our memories with captions in her handwriting describing the photos, letters, and picture frames. She gifted me all these sentimental items that would later devastate me after the actual breakup. In quarantine in 2020, we had sex for the first time about 3 to 4 months into the relationship. She cried that night, regretting it afterward because we had both intended to save ourselves for marriage. She expressed that she wanted God to be the center of our relationship and felt we had compromised that by becoming intimate. She ultimately broke up with me. Within the next 5 days, while she was house-sitting, she told me she had been crying every moment because she loved me so much and did not want to lose me. I told her I missed her too and that we could change moving forward. We ended up reconciling and dating again. We refrained from being intimate for about a month, but thereafter it became a daily occurrence for the rest of the relationship. She felt safe with me and believed we would get married. She consistently wanted to read the Bible and attend church, which sometimes annoyed me because it felt excessive. As a Christian myself, I believe that my personal relationship with God is the most important. For her, however, engaging with the Bible every single night and going to church whenever possible was essential. Our differing philosophies regarding our faith led to frustration on my part, and I became difficult to be around. This annoyed tone began to permeate our interactions in general, and I started taking her for granted. Throughout the rest of our relationship, we broke up 3 or 4 more times over trivial issues, arguments, or other minor matters, because I was immature and did not know how to act as a man in a relationship. Each time we reconciled within a week, but in April 2022 it was the last time this occurred. She had come over and we had a trivial argument, but I think she had grown tired of the constant bickering and asked me if I even wanted to be with her anymore. In a moment of tough guy bravado, I told her no, not really. She left my house that day and we stopped communicating for a few days. Post-breakup, during the relationship, I had become quite overweight. I am 5 feet 11 inches tall and typically weigh 155 pounds before the relationship, but during it, I had gotten comfortable and gained weight, eventually reaching 195 pounds at my heaviest. I do not recall why, but towards the end of the relationship, I started to get back into shape a little. Anyway, about a week went by, and I realized that the pattern of reconciling after a week had not repeated this time. I started to become anxious and then began to panic because she was serious this time. She texted me saying she missed me, and when I replied, reciprocating her feelings, she said we couldn't get back together at that moment. This cycle repeated over the course of an entire year and a half, often feeling like it happened over 100 times. Sometimes it took longer for her to reach out, but she never allowed me to go completely no contact. She loved me and still cared about me but did not want to resume a relationship. She just wanted to know I was still around. I understood what was happening and knew I should initiate no contact, but every time I did, she would break it without any intention of rekindling our romance. I would then go no contact again, but again she would continually reach out to check on me and I always responded. In this way, she got the validation, she sought evidence that I was still present, that I had not found another girlfriend. She provided me with a false sense of hope, causing confusion and pain in my mind unintentionally. Some days I would feel fine and she would come across as sweet and genuine, just as she had always been. However, there were times I reached my breaking point and would revert to an emotional state, crying and begging, desperate to convey that I could change and reminiscing about our old memories. Each time she would assert that we should not engage in such discussions. I essentially frightened her because that was not what she wanted anymore. She never wanted to let go, but it was easier for her to do so because she held the power now. I had gotten a taste of my own medicine. During this period, she occupied my thoughts continuously. I contemplated every possible way to fix things, often to my detriment because whenever I conjured up a solution in my head, it failed, exacerbating my pain. Most days I cried, and while I channeled my anger and sadness into self-improvement, I worked out 7 days a week and strived to become as fit as possible. I pushed my limits too far and dropped to 140 pounds while being shredded. Additionally, I attended community college for a year, determined to gain admission to my dream school, which was the University of Southern California. After a year and a half, just before I was set to attend USC in the fall, I saw her again. I was driving my nice car, looking fit, and about to attend my dream school. I genuinely had created value. However, at that point, her attraction to me was extremely low because I had begged and pleaded and no longer embodied a man. This occurred about a year and a half after the breakup, in the summer of 2023. I will admit, I had always been dedicated to fitness and had planned to attend USC. However, about 75% of my motivation stemmed from her. Ultimately, I felt I had become a better person, even if my motivation had not originated from within but was instead based on someone else's influence. I felt entirely transformed after that experience. My perspective on life shifted significantly. What saddens me somewhat is that she never dated, never drank, nor engaged in anything during that time. She maintained her values as a virtuous Christian girl, refraining from intimacy until marriage, working diligently, and even became more committed to her faith during that period. She went on a mission trip to Africa driven by such noble intentions. She dedicated everything to God, which is how I believe it should be. Meanwhile, I was there crying, engaging with many girls during that same period, getting fit, earning money, and finally attending my dream school. I was grateful for all that transpired, but it made me respect her so much more because she had a definite purpose in her life. While I was in a relationship with her, I also grew closer to God but slowly drifted away afterward. Then she got a boyfriend about a year and a half after the breakup, in the summer of 2023, right before I started at USC, and I had a final emotional breakdown. At that point, I had largely moved on, but when she entered into a new relationship, it caused me to cry one last time, as there were no longer any instances of her testing me or checking in on me for a while. I asked her if she had been intimate with him, and she said no because she was saving herself again, which hurt more than if she had just gone through with it. She somehow managed to do nothing wrong. Time at USC. Now, in August 2023, I pledged a fraternity but ended up dropping out towards the end. I made a lot of friends, and my life consisted of attending classes, drinking 4 days a week, and socializing with friends at various frats because I am quite sociable and still have many connections. At this point, I was genuinely over her and wished her the best. Although it was less frequent, I would still hear from her, and she began asking me random questions, seemingly seeking assistance with a class, inquiring about my experiences after our breakup, or even asking if I wanted a pet for my apartment, etc. I would respond to her, but I did so without feeling desperate or needy. A month or two would pass in between each interaction, and I never questioned it. I would simply respond and move on. While I occasionally experienced random thoughts of her and would check her Instagram and other social media periodically, I no longer felt the intense emotions I once had. I still occasionally get those thoughts to check on her, but it is only about once or twice a month. During my first year at USC, I became distracted and ended up engaging with around 30 girls over that year. I had some ability to do this, attracting strong interest from them, yet I felt bad because I did not love the same way they loved me. Some girls would cry to me, write about me, and share their thoughts, struggling to understand me. I just could not commit to anyone because of my first love and what I had experienced. I did not believe in that theory until I lived it. I realized that I would inevitably relate every girl I encountered back to my ex. If they did something she would not do, it quickly became unattractive to me. It was not that I wanted my ex back, she had simply set a standard. Some of these girls were incredibly attractive, yet I still did not care and could not envision a serious future with them. However, my ex would still check in on me without any overt expressions like "I miss you." She would call me from unknown numbers and then deny it when I assumed it was her, since that was something she had done in the past. To sum it up, I maintain a similar lifestyle to the present day, though I am more composed and concentrated on my career now. Present day, nearly 3 years since we started dating, and a year and a half since we broke up, and about a year since she started dating that guy. I am now 21, and she is now 20. Ironically, a week or two before our anniversary in February 2025, she breaks 6 months of no contact by having her friend ask me a random question about a trivial topic. I found it peculiar because I had not spoken to her friend, female, 20, since high school, so I immediately felt suspicious. Afterwards, while talking to her friend, she said nothing about my ex. She was only seeking advice. Later that day, I saw on the friend's story that they were together. I found it amusing because I knew my ex had orchestrated that interaction or wanted to hear my voice indirectly. Again, I moved on. Then she began increasing the frequency of her unknown calls and later texted me, saying she needed help with finances or whatever excuse she concocted. These were all subjects she could easily search for herself. On one occasion, she asked me through text what NPV stood for. Gradually, we started communicating without any romantic feelings involved. After all this time, she seemed to have regained some respect. We ended up talking on the phone as I helped her with schoolwork, and she never once brought up our past or anything. I updated her on my life and listened to her without questioning her about her current boyfriend, just being a friend. Well, she also refrained from mentioning anything from our past, not her boyfriend nor anything about us. Eventually, I discovered that she had broken up with her boyfriend. I was somewhat surprised because he seemed like a decent guy, but I guess he direct messaged another girl, leading her to end their relationship. I had previously seen that they were making wedding Pinterest boards, so I had assumed it was quite serious. Anyway, we eventually met up for coffee. We caught up in person, engaged in genuine conversations, and she told me about church, gym routines, and whatever else. There was no mention of our past from either of us, and she revealed that all those unknown calls were indeed from her, laughing as she spoke. Our meetup lasted about 2 hours, there was no awkwardness, and I stated I had to leave. If I had to describe her demeanor during our interaction, I would say she was simply meeting up with me out of curiosity. There was no flirtation involved. She is not a very flirtatious person in general. She did not express excessive excitement to see me. It felt like a typical interaction between friends. I teased her a few times, but nothing too extreme. After the meeting, I did not think much about it. I had entirely shed any sense of neediness because I am focused on my life and personal goals. She continued reaching out over the past month, texting me about once or twice a week, seeking help with different subjects, school assignments, or requests. Most recently, she had a project where she needed to interview people of a specific ethnicity and asked if I knew anyone. I provided her with names. Now she mentioned that her group plans to give gift cards to the participants and wanted to give them to me to distribute among my friends. That brings us to the present. She just texted me as I pen this about needing one more person because her group cannot find another participant. Regardless, I do not feel needy about it. I am uncertain about what is happening. I know that I would probably say yes to the idea of getting back together in the future, but it would need to feel completely new. I also am not worried if it does not work out because I sincerely want the best for her. Honestly, I'm not overly invested in the outcome. Objectively, I can see that it is somewhat reminiscent of our past experience, only this time I do not have a negative reaction toward it. I have been positive and fun to be around again. I am not feeling stressed or needy, but I remain baffled as to why she consistently opts to ask me for assistance, yet I do not react. With that context, I would still be open to the possibility of being with her in the future, as I believe it could work out, but I do not know how to pursue it from here. This is why I am seeking advice and hoping others can provide their observations. Currently, my plan is to continue with my life, focusing on my happiness and goals, and should she express romantic interest again, I will take it from there and aim to create something new together. Who knows, I might even realize I am no longer interested. The only reason I would entertain any of this is that she never did anything wrong or hurt me. I believe I hurt myself by becoming complacent and needy. Describing her current interest level is a bit tricky as she falls in the middle of what it has been in the past, meaning she is not obsessed, nor does she view me as someone who is desperate. She is just exploring, perhaps testing the waters for validation once more. I believe there might be potential for us, given that her social life revolves primarily around church and work. She commutes to school and is not very engaged socially. While it is feasible she could be utilizing me strictly for validation again, I doubt it. Even if that is the case, I do not think I would be significantly impacted by it. I hope that is not the scenario because it would be wonderful to begin anew with her. However, I understand that she is not the only girl in this world, and there could be someone better suited for me. I just do not want to dive in and start suggesting we see each other more if she is simply seeking affirmation. I do not wish to make the same mistakes of the past. In my mind, I believe that she will return once her tests have played out, but I am uncertain. Summary. We started dating in early 2020 when I was 16 and she was 15. Our relationship experienced multiple breakups and reconciliations for trivial reasons. After our final breakup in April 2022, I focused on self-improvement, getting fit, and achieving personal goals. For a year and a half following the breakup, she toyed with my emotions. She began dating someone else for another year and a half. During and after that relationship, she started reaching out intermittently, asking for help with schoolwork and other random topics. We met once, but there was no discussion of our past, and the interaction felt like a normal, friendly catch-up. Currently, she texts me occasionally, but I am uncertain of her romantic interest or if she is simply seeking validation. I do not feel desperate to reconnect, yet I would entertain the idea if the opportunity arose because I respect her and believe we could create a fresh start together. Questions. What can you observe from her present behavior that might help me determine whether to pursue her or not? What patterns do you see in my behavior or hers that would suggest there is a chance for us or not? If there are positive signs, how can I transition from infrequent messaging, once or twice a week, to going on a date again without rushing things? Keep in mind that she has not shown any flirty or romantic behavior, but continues to reach out. Please feel free to ask questions for more context.